I'm Mike Romano. I run the Three Strikes Project here at the Law School. It's really my huge pleasure to be here to help host Emily, who's one of my favorite and best ever students, and she came on to work for us at the Three Strikes Project, and now that she's gone on to do some really amazing things that we'll hear about today. Just a word about format. I'm going to get out of the way in just a quick moment. That Emily and Matthew are going to talk about Emily's book, and then we'll have conversation. The hope is to have it about, time-wise, about half. These guys talking, and then leave about half the time for Q&A. So please come prepared for that portion of the program. Now it's my job to introduce Matthew Clare, who is an assistant professor of sociology and by courtesy at the law school. His scholarship examines the inequality in the courts and the legal profession. He's the author of the award-winning book, Privilege and Punishment, How Race and Class Matter in Criminal Court, published in 2020 with Princeton University Press. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Matt.
All right, thank you.
You have it, Matt.
Yes, I think so. I think it's, yeah. So I think we're going to hand it to you first, Emily, to sort of give us some insight into this wonderful book, which, for those of you who have not read it, I mean, I'll say my piece, but it's a wonderful book, and it is such an enjoyable read. I read it in a day, and couldn't put it down. So, Emily, please introduce the book. Tell us a little bit about something that you'd like to share about it.
Sure. I received the wonderful suggestion to read a very, very brief part of the book to you guys. I'm going to read like one paragraph. It's really just to prove to you that I don't talk like a lawyer, and so that if you read this book, you won't feel tired. No offense to all the lawyers in the world. Okay, so this is from the beginning of the book, after I've explained a little bit to the reader about why I have a perspective on the criminal court system. I talk about my having been a public defender, and I also talk about my having been a person who needed to be defended, and how that has given me a perspective on the law that's not terribly theoretical or academic, she said to a law school audience, but fairly human-centered. So, after all that, I have to break it to you. This book is not about public defenders. It's about you and your legal system and the things you should know about it. The American people deserve to know what their legal system is doing and not doing in their name and on their dime. Being a public defender affords a lot of access to the men behind the curtains of our court system. It also offers access to the people we should listen to the most in this conversation, people who are personally impacted by arrest, prosecution, and imprisonment. Many of the people I have served would also like you to know the truth about their experiences, and so I'm grateful to have their partnership in telling these stories. To be entrusted with their stories also means doing the work of placing those stories in context, marshaling the available evidence on how this system is harming not just them and their families, but all of us. After all, safety is not individual. It's a shared state. Happily, many of these problems are problems for which there is already an available solution. We just need the political will to fully implement it. And if more people see the inner workings of this machine, the will to fundamentally change it will grow. So I'd like to take you with me on a tour, down and down through some very dark places, but ultimately emerge into some transformative light. A little Dantesque there at the end. But that really is what I'm hoping to do with this book. I'm hoping to reach, I was explaining the other day to people that I'm happy to talk to folks who agree with me, and I'm happy to talk to folks who will never agree with me. But the people I'm most trying to reach with this book are people who don't really think about the system at all, who assume that it is someone else's problem. Now, in actuality, we're living in a country where at this point, half of us have had a loved one locked up. And because 80% of those people are represented by public defenders, literally 1 out of 3 people in this country has had a loved one represented by a free lawyer. And these free lawyers are actually like standing at an amazing nexus point for change. We are upstream in the legal system. We meet people shortly after the moment of crisis, which is their arrest, right? And we are in this really unique relationship where we get to hold everybody's secrets. We are legally protected against ever having to snitch on anybody. So if somebody's got needs that are not flattering to them, right? If they fell off the wagon or they got fired or they made a bad choice, like they can tell me as their defender and that information is safe with me, which means that I am in a really good position to do something with that information and help if I am equipped to get resources relating to housing, employment, education, transportation, treatment support, mental health care. If I am equipped in that way as a defender, I am able to do a huge amount. In my day job, this is really what I do. I build systems that help public defenders take on all of that subject matter I just listed for you, and also write more powerful mitigation in order to bring more people home. That initiative, which is called Partners for Justice, has been in existence for about 8 years. In that time, it has eliminated, we estimate, about 9,000 years of potential incarceration by working with defenders now in 40 locations around the country, across 20 states. We just got some new research back showing that having that capacity increases dismissals and diversions by nearly 50%. All of which is to say, like, that's emblematic of this book. Like, here is an intervention that's super doable, bring more people to work inside public defense with more knowledge beyond criminal legal system knowledge, and bring a lot more people home, and help a lot more people come home, not just at all, but come home well. So I had spent the last 8 years going around the country explaining to lawmakers that if you care just a little bit about this system, you can actually do amazing things. If you're a person who cares about human outcomes, you could have amazing outcomes relating to housing and employment and the things that sociologists will confirm make us safer, right? If people have housing and income and access to healthcare, they're less likely to engage in crime. If you're a person who does not care about any of that and you really care about where your tax dollars are going, it's a lot cheaper to have people home in the community working their jobs and paying their taxes and shopping at the corner store and not incurring the massive health impact of incarceration than it is to pay for incarceration. So after like 8 years of talking to a lot of lawmakers in 20 different states, I thought, what if I just wrote it all down and tried to change not only the minds of the county boards of supervisors and state legislatures that I'm talking to, but regular people who could then be more informed when they are talking to their board of supervisors or when they are looking at a ballot in front of them and trying to decide whether or not to vote for a prosecutor candidate or a judge. What if I could show people how this system underpins all of the government overreach we're seeing today and also underpins subject matter you might think this has no relationship to? So that's what the book is. It's an attempt to tell everybody else everything I've learned in the last couple of decades. I'll pause there.
Yeah. It's not just an attempt, it is a success at doing that. I think it's such a powerful book, and I think for a law school audience, particularly for those of you who are law school students, you know, you mentioned your audience is everyday people, you know, you wanted to get that, but I actually think this book is also a great book for students. For people who are thinking about building a career, we get to learn a lot about your career and your work at Partners for Justice, but also the years that you spent as a public defender in California and in New York.
There's a lot of hot tips for future litigators.
So many tips. So many that actually one that I'm going to bring up in some of my commentary because I found it absolutely hilarious, one of your tips. But okay, so The Price of Mercy offers a powerful indictment of our criminal legal system. Written from the perspective of a former public defender, the book emphasizes the myriad ways that police and courts manufacture crime, coerce guilty pleas, and trap the working poor and marginalized racial and ethnic minorities in cycles of poverty, joblessness, and debt, and also incarceration. This is a book that sheds light on the plight of those with the most at stake in the court process, criminal defendants, whose life, liberty, and property is often on the line. Specifically, Emily details the biases that disproportionately white judges hold, how police overtime, resource targeting, and misconduct flood our courts with petty cases, how prosecutors overcharge in ways that pressure even innocent defendants to plead guilty, how junk science wriggles its way into courtrooms, how the democratic potential of juries is undercut, and how seemingly progressive reforms like community supervision and diversion end up entrenching inequality rather than reducing it. And then in the latter half of the book, Emily walks us through several solutions, some more radical than others. She suggests diversifying the bench, reducing school discipline and fundamentally rethinking our punitive approach to children, decriminalizing certain crimes, increasing data transparency and access to courts, reducing caseloads by unbundling policing, severely reducing police involvement in traffic stops, restorative justice programs that strive for accountability rather than punishment, and investing in housing, healthcare, neighborhood quality, and of course, public defense. All right, so if this catalog of the many topics covered in the book is not enough to get you to purchase a copy, which are outside waiting for you to purchase them, then perhaps a bit about the book's style will do the trick. So those of you who know Emily, and I've gotten to know Emily over the past year, which has really improved my life. I don't know if I've improved your life.
Yes,
but,
no,
okay,
you absolutely
you really,
have.
okay,
Huge
great.
level up for
She
me.
just had to say that publicly. Emily is an affable, warm, open person. And these characteristics make the book an honest and witty read. Emily's resolute voice and unique experiences keep you flipping the pages. In the first few pages, we learn about Emily's arrest at 16 and the judge who gave her a second chance. As the book progresses, we get to know her work as a public defender, where she devised creative ways to keep sleepy judges awake, such as wearing noisy bracelets to ring the alarm when she was advocating for a client. We also get to know some of the clients she represented, such as Janelle, a Black woman whose harrowing experience being charged with insurance fraud illustrates the collateral consequences of years-long court cases. The book is also full of history lessons, such as the history of jury nullification in 18th century England. We also meet various historical heroes, such as Clara Foltz, who was the first woman lawyer in California and a proponent of the public defender idea. We also meet history's anti-heroes, such as Alexander Holtzoff, who rewrote criminal court procedures to advantage prosecutors in the New Deal era. While we meet many individuals, Emily reminds us throughout that the pathologies of the criminal legal system are profoundly structural and require collective action to bring about positive change. And so I could go on and on about the book's many qualities, and I hope I gave you a good snippet and summary and overview. But I think we should have a little bit of a conversation before we open it up to you all. So I have maybe 3 questions that we can hear your thoughts on. So my first is, I deeply appreciated the research that went into the book. As a social scientist, I'm always, nerding out when I see footnotes, or endnotes in this case.
They wouldn't let me have footnotes. I swear, I love reading footnotes. They were like, no reader wants to be interrupted in the middle of a page. You have to put them at the end. I was so devastated.
I don't know, the footnotes always make you realize, oh, it's actually shorter than it looks, right? Because you're like reading through and it's actually half the page you actually have to read. Unless you're a nerd and then you really want to read the footnotes.
There's 100 pages of citations in this book.
There's a lot.
So in case anybody was worried about its length, it's heavily cited.
It is, it is. And it's good research that you're engaging with. But not only do you actually summarize existing research, but you also do your own research, right? So you interviewed academics like Paul Heaton at Penn Law School, which I think gives us wonderful insight into how academics actually, their feelings, their beliefs about data access and things like that, things that don't really end up on the page of academic articles or books. And you also interviewed organizers and shared some of your results from Partners for Justice. Can you walk us through the research and writing process? What was it like to interview academics, to seek consent from your former clients, to reach back out to them, or if you kept in touch with them? How did you tie it all together?
So there were a lot of stories I knew I was going to want to tell going in because after 10 years in public defense and having represented over 2,000 people, there's a lot of stories that I'm still angry about and that I think my clients are still angry about. And sometimes to be able to go back to somebody and say, we were both there in the room when this really bad thing happened in your life. And I am with you about how bad this thing was. And would you ever want to talk about what happened? And that's not just true of my clients. In this process, I met other impacted people who had had incredibly bad experiences in our system and who were interested in speaking up about their experience. And that's the most important stuff, right? Is the firsthand, not me as a defender saying, I remember this one time when this thing happened, but somebody giving the context of not only that moment in their life, but where it went from there and what they then had to recover from and all of the obstacles that it placed in front of them long after their case was officially closed. So to me, it was actually I was hoping it would be an empowering experience. I still hope that this book will be an empowering experience. I'll circle back with people a couple years from now and find out. But that's really my goal, is to give people a platform who didn't have that platform during their day in court, because the court was not ready to listen to them on that day, but maybe the public will be ready to listen to them now. Interviewing academics is fascinating. I was just like calling people whose books I'd read, whose books I'd really enjoyed. And I think so many of the solutions in this book and the key things I want the public to understand about the system are kind of hidden in the wheels of bureaucracy. So talking to Paul, for example, Dr. Heaton has done some of the best research out there in public defense. And I wanted to know, like, why is there not more of this? Like, when I'm doing research when somebody asks me a question about how many times has this happened to people, or how many types of cases like this are there, and I have to say, I don't know, nobody's done it. How often do police testify falsely? How much testifying is there in the world? And the best answer you get from academics is, it's literally so common that we don't know. I wanted to know why we didn't know so much. And so learning from him about literally just the structural barriers that prevent younger academics, new academics, and the public from getting access to stuff that it takes enormous institutional resources to otherwise access, like, that's a huge equity barrier. It's an equity barrier that's informational, that's about transparency, it's about the power that the public has to know about their system. Fascinating, and I wouldn't have found out unless I talked to him. So it was a really gratifying process. I basically spent over a year having long tape-recorded conversations with people and transcribing them and reading back through them.
Wow. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the access to data is, especially in this space, I think many institutions or bureaucracies that sociologists, social scientists study, like, are a little bit more transparent. I think there's some inherent lack of transparency that's happening within the criminal legal system, as your book shows, and the reasons why.
Yeah.
But also, I really appreciate you commenting on your former clients and who probably feel silenced often throughout the entire process, and giving them a voice in this book. And I will be very curious to hear, how they feel about, being at
They
the
had
end
a
of it.
voice all along.
They did have a voice. Exactly. No, that's the point.
I'm just creating space.
Trust.
Yeah.
No, the theories around silent, right? Like,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
they're being silenced, right?
Yeah,
They had
exactly.
a voice,
Yeah.
but they're being silenced.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like, great that you're able to allow their voice to speak on these pages.
Yeah. The hardest part actually was picking what to include. It's like there were interviews I would do where I was just like, oh man, I just like, could the whole chapter just be this interview? I don't need to say anything. I'm just gonna let Adelaida or Amir or somebody say it for me.
Yeah. The quotation, the Janelle, is a great, for any of you who are stylistically curious about how to write a great book. That chapter is a great way to show how you take one person's narrative and you weave it throughout to illustrate something more systematic as you're writing the entire chapter. Returning to Janelle through multiple moments of explaining different aspects of collateral consequences, beautifully done.
Thank you. Yeah, so Janelle's story was, she was working for the Department of Education in New York. Her car was missing one morning when she woke up, and she thought that she knew she was behind on the payments, so she reasonably assumed that it had been repossessed. She starts calling around, calling the bank, calling tow lots, trying to find it. At one point, she thinks it's in this phantom tow lot, like literally it's called phantom towing. It turned out to be a phantom promise because she went there to get her belongings from the car wasn't there. Days went by. She had called the police asking them for help to find her car, and they had just never showed up. And the insurance people couldn't move forward until she got a police report that she would need to basically move the other bureaucracies forward. And at one point, she was on the phone with a customer service rep, and she told them, like, look, I just can't get the police to come to my house. And they said, well, tell them that the date of loss was today. Tell them the car got stolen today, and they'll show up. And so she did. And unbeknownst to her, the car actually had been found by the Baltimore Police Department several days prior, because somebody had stolen it, driven it to Baltimore, and lit it on fire. She then was, instead of, having her wrong date on her form that she filled out be construed as a good faith error by a person who was dealing with a bureaucratic nightmare, the Bronx District Attorney's Office decided that she was the mastermind of some sort of insurance fraud scheme, and that she had hired a crew of people to, like, drive her car to Baltimore and set it on fire. And literally the only piece of evidence was the wrong date on the form. That's what they had. 3 years of her life gone. She lost her job. She's literally never got her job back. Every time she applies now, even though we got the charges fully dismissed. I went down to Baltimore and crawled around inside the burnout car looking for clues. We got the case fully dismissed. Her experience illustrates what it is to be accused and have to come back to court dozens of times over years, waiting for something to happen from an overwhelmed prosecutorial agency that hates the concept of dismissal. And then to try to explain your experience to the department where you work, which does not believe that a felony arrest is ever meaningless and will not overlook it. So I'm really honored to have gotten to tell that story with her. And I wish it had a happy ending. We're still waiting for the happy ending.
I want to talk a little bit also about maybe who's not necessarily in the book, and maybe you've gotten some of this, in different audiences, and I'd be curious what your response is. So, the book is an argument, right, about disadvantaged defendants who are going through the system. It's about the public defenders who are protecting their rights and defending them and representing them. And while many of us agree that mass incarceration is clearly a social problem, not everyone does, right? Yeah. Some see the system as not punitive enough in some ways. We know that survivors of sexual assault often struggle to find accountability in our current court system. And some maybe don't want to do or are not yet ready for restorative justice, right, programs and the like. In one part of the book, you mentioned the victim-offender overlap, which I think is a huge part of this too, right? And you also note how some prosecutors even recognize the perverse incentives that they face and that they are, using to justify some of their actions. Can you share how some of the solutions you propose could help to reduce harm in society absent punishment? Like to people who are skeptical, can you explain your arguments around how we can reduce harm without punishment? And also, I'm curious whether prosecutors play a role in this story for you.
Yeah. So I did make a deliberate decision in the book not to give a lot of space to extremely pro-incarceration positions because the culture is steeping in that. Like, we have law and order, our cultural status quo is very, very pro-incarceration, and I didn't feel like I needed to recover that ground. I did include the perspectives of law enforcement, correctional officers, prosecutors, but largely to show that there are a lot of people working on the law enforcement side who also share my concerns about the incredibly poor results, the track record of the system, and also would be interested in more creative and restorative solutions. I share the perspective of survivors, most of whom are really dissatisfied with how the legal system handles their cases. To give you an example, in the study I was looking at, more than half of the survivors surveyed really wanted something to help them recover, recompense, therapy, job protections, forms of support to help them move forward with their lives, and only 12% of them in the study ever received any of that, mostly because 90% of the prosecutorial agencies they looked at required full participation in the prosecution in order for the survivor to receive anything. And so there were people who had not wanted to take part for whatever reason and who were given nothing by their government, which is of course terrible because that also doesn't solve harm, that doesn't make us safer. The big through line is taking care of people probably makes us a lot safer. Study after study after study shows that giving people the things they need to survive and helping them have a life that is stable make them much less likely to engage in harm. Again, housing, income, and healthcare, the three things that really, really seem to make the biggest difference with people. Exposure to incarceration in multiple studies seems to make it harder for people to avoid harm, which might be why we have nationally around a 60% recidivism rate. I have definitely talked to people who are never going to... I remember I was presenting to a lawmaker in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, and I gave this talk to the Board of Supervisors, and afterwards he was like, just so you know, miss, I don't share your enthusiasm for reduced incarceration. And it was a good reminder for me that many people don't. But I think at this point in our country, there's a critical mass of people who do. For one thing, it's hard to make the argument that the status quo is working at this point. Like, it's very hard to say this is fabulous. it's also, if you talk to, for example, police officers, they don't want to be everyone's social service multi-tool. That's not what they signed up for. Like, they signed up, most of them, to, like, address real scary violence. And when they are asked to deal with, if you look at, like, a pie chart of what police spend their time on, the vast majority of it, like, probably 80% of it is, like, unfounded calls, dogs barking, somebody peeing on a doormat. And then there's, like, a huge chunk that's just, like, acts of desperation from people whose lives are not going well. And a lot of that is mental health stuff, poverty-driven, you know, selling stuff that you don't have a license to sell, or drug trade, or trespassing because you don't have somewhere to be or to go. They would also, for the most part, like specialized resources that are designed and trained to address these crises, because police are just not. Prosecutors, too. Most of them signed up to deal with scary violence. And most of them end up, our criminal courts, about 80% of the cases in our state and county criminal courts are misdemeanors. So you can already see, like, the sliver of the stuff that keeps people up at night is actually quite fine. And what's clogging the system is social ills we have not devoted the resources to solve. So I think there's actually a really broad coalition of people across all areas of interest in all sides of the system who can acknowledge that helping people is good, actually, that taking care of people would reduce the glut of cases in the system and free everybody up to focus on the stuff that actually is much more concerning. What we also see, though, is the perverse incentives. So, for example, when you have a prosecutor, as I interviewed, who goes into prosecution because they want to change the system from the inside and they really want to address root causes, and they end up in a world where they get shut down by their middle management boss every single time they bring a creative case disposition, or they get told. Literally, one prosecutor I talked to had started sending his white colleagues into meetings with his manager to ask for deals he wanted because he was so tired of being told, oh, you just want this deal because the defendant is black and so are you. Like, what? This is where all the good people burn out of prosecution, is when the incentives are set to focus on quantity of convictions and not level of problem solving. So all of which is to say, like, what makes crime go down is not super mysterious at this point. Like, you will back me up, there have been a lot of studies on what makes people less likely to engage in crime. We're just trying to get the incentives of the system and the professional trajectories of the people working in it, since the system is just humans in rooms, to match what we know about safety.
Yeah. Okay, last question before we open it up for the Q&A.
You guys better have questions for me. I'm hoping and praying. Don't make me sit here in
we've
silence.
got way too many people in this room for there not to be plenty of questions.
Right.
But, you know, I think this actually is political will, theory of change. You know, I'm curious what your sense is. In reading the book, I think there are kind of like two parts where you kind of give us a sense of your theory of change, but I want you to maybe explicate it for us. So you kind of say that political will might come from informing maybe the average voter, right? Of these things that maybe elites know, maybe academics know about what works, but maybe they don't know yet. Particularly given that currently views on crime generally in the general population are distorted by sensationalist media accounts, police media campaigns, social media campaigns, and also political polarization. You write, if we were able to wave a magic wand and get the most cutting-edge data and analysis on safety out to every voter in America, we would experience a sea change in which policies people choose to support. So I'm wondering, could you share more about how informing the public could shift change and lead to policy change? You know, one critic could say, you know, maybe actually, you know, the law is working exactly as it's intended. The average voter, you know, not just white voters, have racist sentiments and punitive sentiments, even against their own groups. And so, you know, how does knowledge sort of combat that heavy weight, right, of the reality of our racist history as a country and present as a country, and the criminal legal system as centrally rooted and fundamentally rooted in preserving the racial order?
So I think that right now we're in a moment, the way I've been trying to describe it recently is that the scale of our peril is outweighed only by the scale of our opportunity. this is an area of tremendous opportunity because it doesn't actually take that many voters to shift policy in this subject matter area, because the Constitution largely reserves criminal law to the states. So most of the policies we're talking about are state law, and even county policy, city policy, like the policies of prosecutorial agencies. It does not take that many constituents to shift a prosecutor election or a sheriff election or a county board of supervisors election or even a state legislative election. I think one of the things that excites me the most is that if people are armed with this information that I'm trying to give everyone, they can demand better of the candidates that they're given. And by demand better, I mean, I can't tell you like how many times I've been asked to vote for someone without knowing anything about what they stand for. I mean, literally in my last local election, I got so mad about this, I started Googling every single candidate, and I was finding like this guy wrote a letter to the editor about how much he enjoys playing tennis with his doctor. This person wrote a poem for our local band. I don't care. I want to know what you stand for. And I think so many of us are in this position of like looking at a judge who's up for election and the only thing you know about them is the D or the R or the I next to their name. And that is not enough because these issues do not break out easily by political alignment. So thing one is getting people to a place where they can at the very least demand to be informed about what they are getting when they vote for someone versus someone else. And letting candidates know that constituents understand this area is connected to so many other areas of our life that they have to care about it too. So thing number one, our country has managed to excise a huge number of voters from the constituency by felon disenfranchisement, which is the practice of depriving. This is a super us thing, guys. This is like a real US thing. This is not normal everywhere. The idea that one's political voice should be tied to one's conduct, as opposed to an inextricable piece of citizenship. So because in this country people can be stripped of their right to vote for a felony conviction, we have jurisdictions in which 1/3 of the black men are not allowed to have a political voice because of the structural racism of the system. So that has really freed our political class to not give a shit about what people think who have experienced this system personally, because in so many places, those people are excluded from the constituency. You don't have to represent them if they can't vote for you, right? So thing number one is making more people able to fill in that demand among the constituency for attention on this issue, real positions on this issue. This issue is going to be in the conversation no matter what, because safety is an amazing political cudgel. Like, people figured out very long ago that if you make the people you're talking to feel scared for their safety and then you promise them that you can make them safe, they will vote for you. People who want mass decarceration and restorative solutions and root cause thinking, like, we have so much evidence behind these positions. These are not like loosey-goosey feeling positions. The feelings positions are actually the supercarceral ones, which is all about punishing people who we're afraid of or we're mad at. A lot of the rational positions here, the evidence-based ones, would look very different than our present system. So I think my theory of change is that I would give voters the evidence basis they need to go to their lawmakers and say, I want you to stop making emotional decisions. Don't say this to any women lawmakers. Only say it to the men, okay? I want evidence-based, rational safety policy. And I am aware, because of all of this research, that what will make me safer is if my neighbor has access to health care. Literally, there's research in the book showing that the size of the jail population in the jurisdiction studied was more tied to the availability of mental health services than to the actual crime rate. So you have a data point. You can say whether people have access to health care matters for how safe our streets are. You have data. You can say, American families are losing over $300 billion a year due to lost wages by people who've been formerly incarcerated. I would like you to pass laws that open up professional licenses for people with a record so that more people can stay employed and can shop at the corner store, which is, of course, what drives our local economy, right? Or you can say, I know that every year of incarceration shaves 2 years off a person's lifespan, and that 80% of people who go in come home with some kind of long-term illness. And as a taxpayer, I am paying for so many people's care because their health was destroyed by this jail system. So I don't want people in our jails unless they really, really, really cannot be safe around other people right now. Or I want to transform our jails entirely. There's a lot of places you can go with regard to what the jails are or whether they're... Point is, bringing the population to a level of confidence that we have in so many other areas of policy, so that these issues can no longer be ignored by politicians who otherwise have the luxury of lying to you about your safety, telling you you're not safe when you are. If you're a lot of people under 50 in this room, y'all are living through the safest period in your lifetimes. But you're going to hear people telling you all the time that you're not, and that you need to vote for them and vote for really punishing policies if you want safety. So I want people to be able to defeat the lies. My theory of change is get the information, defeat the lies, make demands of our political class, and bring this issue to the fore so that it can no longer be sidelined into a status quo that does untold harm.
Awesome. Defeat the lies. All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Emily.
If I ever run for office, Emily Galvin, defeat the lies.
All right, thank you both very much. Let me just add a couple of things about Emily, which is that, well, first of all, you're going to stick around for being able to sign books?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so please come out, buy a book, and get a signature from Emily. But what I think that you do so well is really put insight into our system that at least I'm very familiar with, but you do it with such clarity and wit, as you said, and humility that I think it really does help spread the story in ways that I think are new, and I appreciate it. And I would summarize the book as, like why being a public defender is, righteous profession. But it also, I think, offers solutions to what I think is kind of the next generation problem of mass incarceration. I would say the last generations, or my generation of mass incarceration, was concerned about, or principally focused on, the death penalty and life without parole and, 3 strikes. But that is, in California, fewer than 2% of all arrests end up in prison at all. Forget about long prison sentences. So that's 98% of the system is really what Emily's book is about, and I believe that that's the mass of mass incarceration, and I think you offer some real solutions.
Yeah.
So with that, I have microphones, and I'll pass them out to those questions. All right. I'm going to start up here, and then you can go next. There are hot mics, so be careful.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for being here and for writing your book. I wanted to follow up about a comment you made about diversion programs and kind of alternatives to incarceration, kind of also kind of generating or replacing kind of the same biases that you see in other more punitive forms of punishment.
Yeah. So diversion programs are not a panacea. Because they're only as good as the people implementing them, right? I think one of the most frustrating things as a defender is fighting really hard to get your client an opportunity to do some sort of treatment that they're actually interested in and that they want to do for their life that has nothing to do with the criminal legal case. And then you get them there into that court that supposedly offers this thing. And I remember one client coming to me and saying, like, why do I have to do this? Like, there's no actual treatment, there's no actual therapy, there's no actual therapist. It's like 10 dudes who smoke a cigarette in a room and sign a piece of paper, and that's treatment. And it's not helping me. And I want actual help. That is deeply frustrating because as a defender, I have no control over which programs are offered. And also, for many people who are very low income, their access to a program that they could never afford is governed by this court process, which is also stupid. One of the major things I really support in the book is forcing systems to shift into a model where user feedback is considered. Which, by the way, in every other industry, right, user feedback is actually really, really important. But in our courts, because they have so devalued the perspectives of people who are accused, we get no feedback. I'm the one who gets the feedback. Me, the public defender, gets the feedback about how terrible a program is. And then if I go to the judge and say, Judge, this program's actually lying to you, they're not providing real care, it's useless for everybody, I'm going to have the Department of Probation say, that's not true, we approved this program. And they're the decider. They're not gathering customer feedback either. I don't think customer feedback on the Department of Probation would be great anywhere. My point is, we have to stop being afraid. The system should not have the luxury of being able to shield itself from negative feedback, right? And that's something that people can demand. They can say from the county, hey, I want our local courts to receive feedback from people using our diversion program to know if it's effective. And I want them to be held accountable. And I think that we should, if we need to dedicate a little more funding to get somebody better programs, if the whole point of this is to make people reach a state of stability in their lives where they're no longer going to come back into the system, that's a really good investment. Another thing that is a driver of uselessness in diversion programs is gatekeeping. So often these programs are considered like a special gift from the prosecution, only for the most deserving of people. What does it actually look like in practice, right? That looks like the kid who's on his first arrest, who had one ecstasy pill in his pocket. He gets diversion. Does he need diversion? Maybe, but maybe he just went to a party this one time and had an ecstasy pill in his pocket, and he doesn't have a substance use disorder, and he doesn't have a problem, and we are wasting this resource on someone who probably should have just gotten some community service or something, and dismissal, clean record. And the client who, for me, there's a very specific person I have in mind, who was a client who had repeatedly engaged in the same felony conduct over and over and over again whenever they were high. It wasn't something where there was any interpersonal violence. It was like going into building lockers to try to steal a particular item that could be resold. And my client didn't want to do this ever again. This is just something that was driven by a long time, and I mean decades old substance use disorder. You know what my client wanted? My client just wanted inpatient treatment, which they could never otherwise afford. But technically the charge was burglary, which is not a drug crime. And so I'm going to the prosecutor and I'm saying, hey, I know it's not a drug crime, but it's a crime that's caused by drugs. Could we deal with the fact that the underlying problem here is a substance use disorder and bring this person to the program? Absolutely not. That line prosecutor who actually did want to do it took the question all the way up to the head, to Darcel Clark at the Bronx TA's office, and we were told no. And as long as these programs are structured to offer abundant help to people who don't really need it because they're perceived as palatable by the prosecution, and no help to people who need it the most because their record, which the prosecution considers unpalatable, demonstrates a long-standing history of need, we're not actually solving anything. We're just lighting money on fire and making ourselves feel better about us having a diversion program. Yeah. One last thing, because you asked about equity. I'm so sorry. The last thing is, this is always going to be informed by means. If a person gets arrested and their family has the means to immediately check them into a treatment program so that by their first court date they can say to the judge, look how seriously I'm taking this. I'm already in treatment. They're going to look different to the decision maker, to the prosecutor or the judge, than a person whose family could never afford to do that. And so already the inequity of our country that is racially tied, that is very much related to income, it's been neutralized. It's been hidden under something that is perceived by the court as seriousness, like how seriously are you taking your case, when actually what the court is experiencing is just a difference in wealth level. Okay, now.
I'll quickly just add,
Yeah.
The case of the kid with ecstasy,
Yeah.
who doesn't have a substance use disorder,
Yeah.
right? Why not just dismiss that case, right? So when you have these tools, they become used as net wideners, pulling
exactly.
people into the system for longer. And what if, your case when you were 16 wasn't dismissed? What if you had to go through all this rigmarole?
I never would have gotten to go to college. I don't know what would have happened after that. I would have done worse things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Been tripped up for longer, right? And then we wouldn't have you here, right? And having,
I'd be here in a different context. I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving this talk today. I wanted to ask you about two issues that I thought of in your answer about informing the public.
Mm-hmm.
So the first is just, popular perceptions of crime. I really liked that you said, that the anti-carceral side is the evidence-based side and the pro-carceral side is the emotional one.
Mm-hmm.
I think what concerns me is that it seems like those emotional responses drive a lot of how people see crime, Like we're in the midst of this perceived crime wave that seems to be driven a lot by people's subjective experiences, biases around race, class, and gender, etc. So that's one major issue. And then the other is just people's shortened attention spans in terms of, communicating a message that you've written in a book. And so, I'm just curious, how do those challenges of popular perception and shortened attention spans affect how you're trying to communicate your message?
Great questions. Thank you for those questions. So thing number one is that a huge chunk of the problem here is media that is beholden to clicks. Because if your media is making money off of how many clicks it can get, it is always going to want to cover the weirdest crime story it can possibly find, the scariest crime, a crime that may be super unique and not likely to happen to, like 99.99% of people are never going to experience this crime, but it's very, very memorable. And this isn't new, by the way. Having clicks is new. But, even in the time of like our early newspapers in this country, we had the expression, if it bleeds, it leads, because newspapers would sell more if they had a gory crime on the front cover. And this fostered a relationship between journalists and police, which was very close, because who are the people who can give you the gory details that will sell your papers? The police. So we're just dealing with an echo of a problem that we have always had. I think one thing I'm hoping we can push for collectively is for media to cover the stories that are actually likelier outcomes from a lot of these hot button topics, which is hard because those are usually not news. So for example, the person who is released on, in a no cash bail jurisdiction, the person who is released who does something horrifying, always going to be in the news. The 15,000 people who were released who went home and had dinner with their families or went to work the next day or went to school and didn't lose their job and nothing bad happened, never going to get covered. So part of this is about equipping people who work in these movements and in the system to better bring the stories of not just nothing bad happened, something good happened. A child had their parent home at dinner. A child went to school the next day. Really trying to get those more visibility so that people have a better ability to assess the actual likelihood of something. I talk about in the book people's feeling of how at risk they are of particular types of crime versus other forms of death, and actually we're underestimating other forms of death and dramatically overestimating crimes. That's from what's on the nightly news. And again, this is a local problem. It's not generally coming from federal crimes, federal stories. It's really, really what can you do in your jurisdiction to change what's coming through. Thing number 2 on attention span, I also make really short Instagram videos about this stuff. I'm old, so I use Instagram. But I think that repetition works really well, even in a reduced attention span world. And I think that because the data is there, it's very easy to just keep pushing it and keep bringing it up and keep mentioning it until it seeps in to our national consciousness. This is already happening. One of the reasons that I would posit that we are in such a safe period is that in the years following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, there were really cool initiatives that got funding and got legs and were able to move forward and then had spectacular results. I talk about in the book about a program that's a reentry program in LA that has a 3% recidivism rate in a state with a 60% recidivism rate. You can't beat that data point. That's an awesome, awesome data point. So slowly the Overton window is shifting. It is slow. It is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And because our attention spans are so short, it's also easy to feel like we're always living in the worst moment ever. There may be other reasons why this is the worst moment ever. But in my topic, actually a lot of progress has been made, and that gives me so much optimism about what is possible with the traction I foresee this movement having in the next 5 to 10 years.
Hi, Emily. My name is Adelaide, everyone, and I'm a contributor in the book. But I wanted to discuss my light bulb turned on when you discussed about how media will put things on there for clicks. So I won't disclose much, but what happened with me that got me arrested and put me in prison was the media article after. So my son's father told the media that I stabbed him over Snickers bar. That's all I'll say. You can read the book. But I was ruthlessly mocked on the radio stations often. And then when I finally got convicted, the article said, "Mom to breed trades candy bars for prison bars." Oh. And so, but at the time I asked my lawyer, why are they talking about this Snickers stuff or whatnot? He would say it was sexy news, which was, at that time I did not really grasp what that meant. But it was embarrassing because, when they write about celebrity articles about this tabloid stuff, they get mocked. And then now I felt that for me, where I was heavily mocked in prison, especially when I got out, to where I work now. Someone said to me, "Oh, I read about you." And that is so embarrassing that, because you wanted to get that click, people read about it. Yeah. And so on a different area, I want to also touch base on when you say professional licensing. So you go to prison, you do your time, rehab, etc., parole, whatnot. But I've always wanted to be a notary public. And so California law says, or the rules of things say on the website, you have to be off parole 10 years. What kind of nonsense is that? 10 freaking years. So when I applied to be a notary public, it was 11 years off parole, not out of prison, off parole. I did the test, passed everything, sent it off to the Secretary of State, and I had to put down all the stuff I did to get into prison, and I'm out, and somehow it was denied. So then I had to reach out to lawyers who didn't know what the hell to do. They're like, I don't know about this. So I had to really get a bunch of people to appeal this case, that if I didn't have the help of attorneys that I know on my corner, I wouldn't have known what to do if I didn't have that in my corner. So I think that should be something that legislators should look at. Like, how often do you have to make somebody wait to get a notary public license? Because no matter what, your background will always be, vilified. For example, folks in the prison system that do the fire camp. CAL FIRE will hire them, but they can't be hired because they can't get that EMT license. So again, professional licensing will be something that people can touch base on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was having dinner with someone the other night who was talking about the fact that forms of relief that he would become eligible for wouldn't be available to him until 10 years out. And this is really interlinked with our really weird sense of time in this country, because we perceive 10 years as a short period of time. But if you're living through 10 years of joblessness because you cannot get the profession that people train for in prison. I've never understood the barbering thing, where like you can train to be a really great barber in prison and then you can't get a barber's license because we're apparently afraid of like Sweeney Todd in this country. There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of these licensure bars, which of course just entrap people in a world where one study I looked at from Alabama showed that 38% of people they talked to had committed new crimes to pay back old debts because they had no other professional option available to them. And for a chunk of those people, they were new, more serious crimes. I mean, literally our refusal to reintegrate people and give them opportunities is creating new crimes that wouldn't have happened otherwise. On the flip side, there's a survey of managers, of people who manage teams that include formerly incarcerated members. 86% of those managers said that their formerly incarcerated team members were as excellent, if not more excellent, than their non-incarcerated team members. So it's just like these are policy fixes which are common sense. There's little reason to hesitate on them other than that they've been deprioritized. In places where that licensure issue has gotten the attention of a lawmaker who's passionate about it, it has moved forward. And it's been a really feel-good bill. But it's about elevating how much attention they have to pay. And thank you for sharing that. I do hope you will read the book, because what really happened in her case is so much more intense than something involving a Snickers bar, and you survived so much.
Yeah, thank you. And my son's right here, and talking about how you mentioned that folks can, become managers or leadership. I now work at UC Berkeley School of Law,
Okay.
but I always rep Stanford.
I made them clap for Berkeley. Yes.
Thank you, Emily.
Hi.
Thank you for sharing your story as well. I'm interested in the realities of using your book as a young public defender. So we read your book and we go into the courtroom. There's a line of attorneys waiting to argue whatever motion they have. How do we use what we're going to learn in your book to convince the judge or the prosecutor in negotiations?
I love this question so much. Okay, so here's the secret. I didn't actually initially set out to write this book for everybody. What actually happened was my dad got really, really sick, and he was in a hospital in Denver, and I was sitting at an Airbnb near the hospital in Denver trying to keep my mind off my dad, and I thought, how can I distract myself? I'm just going to write down everything I know. What do I know about the most? I know how to be a good public defender. So I'm just going to write that down, and it was a coping mechanism that is not a marketable book, because the only audience is future public defenders. Eventually, I broadened. But most of what's in the book, beyond giving people a sense of the entire soup to nuts structure of the system and options they could fight for legislatively, are just tips about how to navigate a system that is presented as if it were a neutral system of laws and procedures, which is actually just humans in rooms. And some of the humans get to sit up high and have a fancy dress, and others don't. And so, for example, how to approach arraignments. You will be trained in arraignments on what your factors are, right? That you are, in some jurisdictions, they're considering likelihood of return to court. In other jurisdictions, they're considering dangerousness. But what you should be considering is, you are going to have to meet another human being who may be having the worst day of their life. And you are going to have to connect with them while they are sitting in a cell, and you are a stranger. And if you're like me, you're a stranger who looks like the whole system. And you're going to have to get them to trust you enough to give you their story in about 10 minutes, if you even have that. And then you're going to have to go in front of a judge who is tired, a judge who has been there all day, a judge who has heard every story multiple times. And you're going to need to get up there and make them, through your storytelling, able to look at the person next to you and see potential instead of threat. And you're not going to have to do this just once. You got 15 people you need to do this for. So you need to make sure that each story you tell is different enough from the one before it to make that judge see the humanity and the promise and the potential in person after person after person, even when they're tired, even when they're hungry, even when they hate you. So instead of doing what lawyers do, which is to get up and say, Emily Galvin-Almanza for the defense waived the reading but not the rights they're we are on the case of Mr. So-and-so. He's lived in the jurisdiction for 15 years. This is his fifth case, but he's always come back to court in his prior cases. Is anybody going to listen to that? It was a perfectly appropriate arraignment argument. But you might want to start with, Mr. So-and-so takes care of his mother. She requires dialysis 3 times a week. You know who's there to drive her every single time? Even though he's working a full-time job, you know who's never late because his mother's life depends on it? Mr. So-and-so, which tells you how good this man is at showing up to court. But let me tell you a few more things about his life. And then you go from there. And so a lot of what's in the book is how to ditch a lot of what you're told about what is appropriate lawyering and remember that these are just humans in rooms and go from there.
Will has a question.
I love that. While we're looking for, I just want to add, I think the book also reminds us that it's not just you.
Yeah.
The book is so structural in its critique and its analysis, and it reminds, I think, early first-year public defenders, like, when you're in the trenches, when you're telling those stories, when you're trying to create narratives, you have a team behind you, and you have an institution, the Public Defense Office, that can shift too, and that you can be part of that change and shift. And I think that's really what I took away personally from the book.
Exactly.
Hi, thank you for being with us. This is kind of taking a different angle, but you alluded to having thoughts about this in terms of rethinking what a prison is.
Yeah.
Just like, do you feel like there should be prisons? What should it be? Like,
no.
And does that conversation, how does that conversation also come up when you're faced with people who are like, we shouldn't reduce the incarceration rate?
Yeah. So here's where I start from. If you're going to pick a North Star, if you're going to pick a world to envision that is your best world that you want to fight for as a human with limited time on this earth, why would you pick a world that has prisons in it? So to me, we should all be doing what Ruth Wilson Gilmore describes of trying to build the circumstances under which prisons are no longer necessary. Now that is a long path. I am not saying that you could hit delete on all of our prisons here today and that we would be in a better place. I think there genuinely are people who are not safe to be around other people right now. And we need to grapple with, as a society, one, how do we make changes in our society so there are fewer people who cannot be around other people right now? And two, how do we keep people away from others when they're not safe in a way that doesn't make everything worse? Because when you look at what our prisons do, if the goal was to have people come home safer, and by the way, pretty much everybody comes home, more than 90% of people who are incarcerated come home, we would do everything differently if we wanted to equip them to come home better able to succeed than when they went away. I am not someone who believes in accelerating the path towards abolition by keeping prison conditions as awful as possible. I don't think that actually moves us in a good direction. And frankly, since I know a lot of people who are sitting in prisons right now, I don't think they can afford to wait for our perfect policy goals to be achieved. I think that they have urgent needs today. Hell, they have urgent needs 10 years ago that need to be addressed. So I do talk a lot in the book about conditions of confinement, about opportunity in prison, about education, about access to resources, about ending slavery in America, one would feel like this would be a rallying cry, right? Ending slavery in America, yet California did not support that policy when it was last on the ballot. But literally at every turn, for example, I talked to a warden in the book, former director of corrections for the state of California, who affirms that when people can earn money and send money home to their family and send their kid a Christmas card or a birthday gift, not only does it change their relationship to who's waiting for them outside so that they have a better network to come home to when they're going to need to come home and find a job and have a place to stay, it changes how they feel inside. And research bears this out, that people who, for example, have more access to visitation and who get more visits are less likely to engage in violence inside the prison, keeping the prison safer for the people confined there and the people working there. And yet, we're in a moment where for-profit tablet companies are trying to eliminate in-person visits and literally pressuring wardens to eliminate in-person visitation so that people will be forced to use the paid tablets for video visitation instead. Or if we're fighting to take away actual in-person mail, where you can hold the object that your loved one held, or take a photograph of your child and put it on your wall, in favor of an electronic copy that's not yours to keep unless you pay for it. And even then you can't put it on the wall. We should be fighting tooth and nail against these policies, which research tells us are not going to make anybody safer. They're going to line the pockets of some for-profit companies and deprive people of the right to hug their children. There's a movement right now that talks a lot about the right to hug. I think that's a great legislative push, right? Everybody should have the right to hug their kids. So, my perspective is that yes, I am an abolitionist, but I'm also a realist. And I'm somebody who is extremely concerned with the well-being of folks who are currently serving time. And I think that we can't solve for other problems unless we solve for their needs in conjunction, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Thank you for giving this talk. My question regards something you said earlier, is that these issues don't break up neatly into political ideology. I was curious about if there are other ideological lines that you think these issues break up more neatly along, and if we're in terms of coalition building in this movement, who's that next group that we can fold in?
Yeah.
Moving forward?
Libertarians are ripe for the taking. No, really, I think that the ingredients of what brews interest in this type of thinking is, one, comfort with investing in communities. So comfort with tax dollars going to forms of care that people need, interest in a social safety net. I think what's been really interesting to me is that I always see these issues as governmental and legislative. But I have, there's someone I grew up with who I'm always going to be friends with because we did child labor on ranches together, and he is a super MAGA guy. But we've known each other since we were, running spools of barbed wire at the age of 6, and so we talk. And he is often very much on my side on these issues. And he completely understands the idea that you are safer when your neighbor is well. He sees it through a Christian perspective. He doesn't want the government delivering these services. He thinks it should be relegated to churches and nonprofits. We have a different perspective on the how, but we don't have a different perspective on the whether. So I think there's really interesting through lines you can find with people when you focus on, do you want to help your neighbor be well, especially when it benefits you, as opposed to the usual methodology of delivery. I also think we are in a moment of a very intense object lesson in this country in government overreach and what is possible when in the criminal courts you allow perjury and abrogations of the Eighth Amendment and official misconduct to run amok. We're seeing it writ large in the news, right, with allegations of federal officials potentially perjuring themselves in front of Congress and warehouses that are being built as mass detention centers and conditions of confinement that should violate the Eighth Amendment, but maybe not under our current jurisprudence, which is scary. And also aren't under the Eighth Amendment because they're immigration detentions, it's a due process clause. But what I'm saying is the root of so much of this is brewing in the criminal courts. And we can attack the branch. A lot of people are interested in the branch. If we can get everybody who's interested in the branch to focus on the root, we could get a lot of progress out of that. And that also, I mean, I wasn't joking about the libertarians. Like, I think people who like the idea of due process limiting what the government can do to the individual should be very interested in policies that strengthen the individual's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
All right, I think we have time for one last question. Oh, okay. Well, you raised your hand first. Or if you guys both go quickly, maybe you both ask and Emily, you take
I'll try to be really quick.
All right,
As someone, I can just
go.
Yeah, be loud.
As someone who works within what people would call the system, how do you grapple with, as someone who also identifies as an abolitionist, right, like meeting the direct, urgent needs of folks involved in the system, and also working outside of the larger system that's doing the harm?
Yeah, I see my work as abolition in action. And by that I mean every single time that I've been able to bring somebody home or to prevent the system's controls from being on that person, I have proven that the system was not necessary. So I see it as sort of mosaic building. It's pointillism. I'm going to prove it in a million little cases because that builds the evidence base that we need to make the larger structural points. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. I was brief.
I wonder if you could comment on, we've seen district attorneys be elected in Philadelphia, San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles with a more reformist mindset who then have struggled to implement that, to stay in office. And what lesson can we take from like how we get there in terms of prosecution actually becoming more aligned with what would be good for society?
Ooh, it's a great question. I think one thing is expectation setting at the outset. Like, I think people who run on these platforms need to be very clear with the public about how long things take to work. Because the thing is, an arrest disappears someone instantly. It doesn't fix the problem, but it disappears the problem into a place where the person who is experiencing the problem can't necessarily see it. And so I think we need to be very clear that if you vote for restorative ideas, those take a while to work, and we're going to see the benefit 5 years from now, not tomorrow, maybe 2 years from now, you know? And sharing progress along the way. I think actually Mamdani does a great job of this, of like sharing the little bits of progress and sharing his process of how he's working towards particular things in a very plain-spoken and accessible way. I think that helps people stick with it. Another thing I would say is being aware of the hazards that can have a really detrimental impact on safety that are beyond the prosecutor's control. So for example, police response time matters a lot to deterrence. Long sentences don't matter a lot because most people who commit crimes don't think they're going to get caught. Duh, right? Like, you commit a crime thinking you're going to get away with it. So you're not sitting there thinking, well, this bag contains only heroin, but this bag contains fentanyl, and if I sell this bag, it's going to get me 10 years. No, you're just thinking I've got to look out on the corner so nobody's going to see me sell this bag, right? The likelihood of interruption is deterrent. If I think somebody's going to come and stop me from what I'm doing, I might not do it. That's why observed spaces are much more pro-safety than surveilled spaces. Because observed spaces where people are live there, there's a possibility of interruption. Police response time goes directly to that interruption deterrent. I am not saying that police themselves are very, very important to deterrence, because you can do interruption with a social work first response team, alternative first responders. The question is somebody going to come if a bad thing is happening? Police can deliberately slow their response times when they really, really hate a prosecutor who's in office. They can send crime through the roof by slow walking when they get there. Because right now, in many places, they are the only first responder who we have at our disposal. We don't have a lot of alternative first response teams. I think that prosecutors have gotten really caught up in that, especially in this region, and have not been able to express to the public slow police response times or low clearance rates as also driving the problems that we see with public safety. I think also a lack of investment in the resources that they need to carry out restorative action. That can be a huge barrier to their success. If you vote for a reform prosecutor, progressive prosecutor, whatever you want to call it, and they say we're going to get a lot more people access to support and treatment, and there's no conjuncted bill that invests in the availability of treatment, they're going to have a bad time. We saw this with Measure 110 in Oregon, right? Big decrim, no investment in resources. People had a bad time. So I think really it's about context, landscape, the other players, and communication with the public.
All right, well, thank you very much, Emily.